Jonny, can I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead.
We've been chatting for a little bit, so I wanted to ask just before we start. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but did you color your hair recently?
What do you mean?
You just look a little different. Like I'm looking like it's not your beard, it's not your clothes, it's not in your background. I just did you color your hair blonde?
I've always been blonde. I mean, my parents are blonde, my siblings are blonde, my wife is blonde, all of our kids are blonde. Are you suggesting that I went through the effort to scrape together $8 to $10, get my car keys, jump in the car, drive to Walmart, search for the proper color blonde, and then come home and mix it up in that little bottle, shake it for 10, 15 minutes till it's thoroughly good, and then like force my wife to rub it in my hair and then let it sit for 25 minutes to 35 minutes? So, and then get in the shower and rinse it out with a specialized shampoo just to get this exact color blonde for the fifth element?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, because that's what I did.
Oh, okay. Hey, it looks good.
Oh, thanks.
Look. And welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Darin Lundberg.
And I'm Johnny Craddock.
And today we will be covering the Luc Besson directed 1997 sci-fi extravaganza, The Fifth Element, starring Bruce Willis and Gary Oldman and so much Chris Tucker. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and recap a little bit of last week. We talked about Mrs. Doubtfire and we had a special guest. How did that conversation go and who was our guest?
Well, it went well. We had our mutual friend, David the Nugent.
Nuge. Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. I mean, he's been with us before, talked about the Goonies and now Mrs. Doubtfire. He's had some life changes, but he came on and we talked about Mrs. Doubtfire, what it meant to him. And I thought it went well. I mean, we had a good time. Maybe a little bit of audio technical difficulties, but we got through it.
Yeah, it was good having him bring that kind of personal perspective about, I don't want to bring up that he's like a terminal divorcee, but like he's obviously been through that experience. So that was a little bit more. And then we had another wonderful conversation about Robin Williams and the impact that he had on us. So yeah, definitely go ahead. We got a little bit emotional on all fronts about Mrs. Doubtfire of all movies, but yeah, go ahead and listen to that episode. We had a great time. I hope you have a fun time with it or had a fun time with it. But let's go ahead and let's talk about The Fifth Element. We've got a special guest, again, professional critic, my friend Nguyên Lê from, he's in Texas, so he's in the same state as you. So he brought this movie to our attention, Bruce Willis and his frosted tips. So we'll talk about that. But before we do, let's go ahead and watch the trailer.
All right.
Okay, The Fifth Element from 1997, directed by Luc Besson, starring Bruce Willis, Chris Tucker, Gary Oldman, Chris Tucker, Milla Jovovich, Chris Tucker, Ian Holm, and Chris Tucker. Did I mention Chris Tucker is in this movie? Not that he's in it a lot, but when he's in it, he's a lot. So we'll definitely be talking about that. So, Jonny, I wanted to welcome our next special guest, Nguyên Lê. He's a professional film critic. He's a member of the Houston Film Critics Society, Online Film Critics Society. He's also a contributor writer for Slash Film, Texas Observer, Fangoria, Inverse, The Spool, Pace Magazine, Dread Central, In Session Film, Film Threat, The Film Scoop, Houston Chronicle, and Next Best Picture. Those are just a few of the outlets that he writes for. Nguyên,
Wow.
how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, and sorry for the shakiness in my voice, but it's just that, by you listing the outlets that I've associated with like that, it just made me realize that, wow, I'm sure kind of like a quote unquote messy person, going to a lot of places and leaving footprints everywhere, so.
No, I think people want you. They want you to do that. And so I'm impressed. Like so many outlets to write for and so many different perspectives. So you've definitely got a voice out there. And again, it's like we were saying before, it's just an honor having you on, especially getting to know you over these past few months. So we really appreciate your time coming on and talking about this movie with us.
No, I actually thank you both, because it's always it's always fun to, of course, talk about movies. And in Houston, there isn't exactly that let's just say that this isn't the kind of activity that happens in Houston a lot. So, if it happens through the interwebs, hey, I'm there, I'll barge in. And I guess if I have the budget, libations for everybody, that kind of deal. So
that's great. That's great. Again, just so great having you out there, like having your voice. And so, yeah, I became familiar with you and you guested on Robert's podcast, Crooked Table. What was Franchise Detours when you were on for Batman Begins. So obviously, like any friend of Batman Begins is a friend of mine. And so that's when we started communicating with each other. And just a great episode. And just hearing, I don't know, just your thoughts in that episode. And you're so clear about things. I was especially touched by the way you talked about your family and how they had no connection to Batman himself. I really like that part of the conversation, but it was the movie, how it established like Bruce Wayne as a person, and that's what your friends and family connected with. And that's one of the things that I really loved about that movie and continue to love today. And so, yeah, again, it's just a great way to and since then, like I said, I've been reading all your articles and everything like that. And there's so many that I still haven't absorbed everything. So I guess that's a positive thing that there's still so much out there. But yeah, it's been great conversing with you on Twitter.
And by you referencing, that Batman Begins episode, first of all, thank you for listening, and thank you for have a positive reception towards it, and your episode too, right after, right? Was it?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was a delight to listen to too. So I was like, I hope that one day I can talk to you, and so I think if we have a to-do list, it's just that item is checked, clear cut. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'd love to just chat about Batman Begins, but obviously, like, again, listen to that episode. Everybody that's listening to this, like, again, very impressed by just your thought process and the way you personalized everything, and that comes through in your writing as well. And so it's just you're just been a fun. I don't know. I don't want to attribute you to being a movie or anything, but you've been fun to watch, and it's been fun to like watch you grow and build your your status, and, like you said, your footprint. But yeah, if we wanted to find out a little bit more about you, like if you could tell us like your career as a professional film critic, like you're obviously Vietnamese, and so your experience there and kind of growing up in Vietnam, anything pertinent to you being a film critic and how you became a lover of movies. If you could tell us some about that, we'd love to hear it.
All right, so it began 9,000 miles away. No, I'm just kidding, just kidding. But well, I think my love for films started out when I was young, and I would say I can't give you the exact number because I can't remember it, but I would say that surely it's still too young to be watching certain types of movies, but hey, I did it anyway because I guess I would say that I was fortunate enough to kind of receive an education in a foreign language, and that foreign language being English. And so, you know, every parent would say that, after the hard days at school, you still need to do some additional practice. So I just thought, what kind of activity will be, on one hand, additional practice, but on the other, interesting as well. So I decided to, watch movies just by turning on the English subtitles.
Huh.
Sometimes I do pray that, the disc that I got, because in Vietnam, bootlegging DVDs is kind of a thing. It's kind of like a really big market. So, just pop in the DVD and, just pray that the English subtitles are, top notch or just correct. And then I learned from there. I used to have a small book. I could remember that it was green, and I would just, whenever there's something in the dialogue, or there's a word, or there's an expression where I can't understand, I would just note it down and then just translate it to Vietnamese later on. And well, that personal activity grew into kind of like a familial activity, because I realized that a lot of grown-ups in my family, they actually really want to engage with, for the lack of a better term, uh, Hollywood cinema, but they just don't know how. And they just don't know how because they said that they are English shy. So I just thought that, maybe I can do something here. And by doing something, that would be pop the disc in, turn on the English subtitles. They sit right next to me, and then I would just translate directly from that English subtitles into Vietnamese straight into their ears. So, and well, one film turned into 10, 10 turned into 100, and well, 100 films, of course, it's not going to be all in the same genre, isn't it? So eventually I kind of like, I mean, this is cool and all, but I wish that I could get paid. So,
Yeah.
so that activity upgraded to, talking about films, but hopefully from a fresh enough perspective as a Vietnamese, or, just in more general terms, as someone who lives in a cinema scene that is not as advanced as Hollywood cinema. So professionally, I guess I would begin writing film reviews or film analysis when I was 12, but I think my first professional, like actually professional level publication, that didn't happen until I was in university, writing for the school newspaper. University of Houston, go Cougs. So yeah,
Yeah.
I want to promote and encourage people to engage with Vietnamese cinema a little bit more, but then for a whole lot, like a laundry list of different reasons on both ends, it's just, the interest in Vietnamese cinema, people are either doubtful or people just outright, reject it. So hopefully that changes. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, but but for any person with an interest like me, hopefully it will be easier for them down the line. So
Yeah. Again, like you talked about, that footprint is something that's important. So just to talk to you about why you're an inspiration to me is that, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but I haven't really obviously I haven't mentioned it to you enough or on Twitter enough, but I'm half Chinese. And so my mom is Chinese. She came over from Hong Kong when she was a teenager. She married my dad, who's from Idaho. So I'm very American, but also very Chinese. So it's a little bit of a mix of it. But the thing with me is that I never experienced any of the prejudice or anything like growing up, because I looked more my dad's side than my mom's side. I even had a friend, a mutual friend of Johnny's mine, that thought I was Italian for the longest time. Didn't know I was half Asian. So it's that kind of thing. So I never had to face that prejudice. I never had to, kind of confront people looking at me a little bit differently, or representation in movies and things like that. And again, I don't like admitting it. The thing that finally got me involved, like, was just 6 years ago, is the whole Last Jedi thing with Kelly Tran, how she was, a big part of that movie. And watching the movie, it was weird. I don't usually like talking about Last Jedi because it's so toxic that it always leads down some terrible path, and we get we lose the thread. But watching the movie, I felt something with her character, with Rose Tico, that was like, half of me is being represented in a Star Wars movie that I've never felt before. This is a character who's got a voice. She's not just like, fodder, like cannon fodder. She's not, like the Nemoidians in Phantom Menace, so they're flat out like it seems like a racial, it's like, whoa, like it seems like they're making fun of the Chinese accent. I don't know. It's just weird. It's where I'm not a racial stereotype. It's not like Donnie Yen in Rogue One, who's great, but he's more of a mouthpiece for the mythos and the lore of Star Wars already. So people didn't really push back about that because he was, kind of pushing that and being a part of that. So with Kelly Tran she has that line of, it's not about killing what we hate, it's about saving what we love, which, again, hearing that line, I was like, you know what? That is the point of Star Wars. Like, I've never thought about that before. So I just felt represented for the first time in this Star Wars, this grand, like, everybody knows what Star Wars is, and everybody's going to know what, like there's an Asian character that's a part of it. And then there was this huge pushback against her. I'm not sure because she was a woman, or because she's Vietnamese, correct? She's a Vietnamese actress.
She's of Vietnamese descent.
But yeah, that toxic, where she was like kicked off of Twitter and Instagram, and she closed down on all of her stuff, and then coming back for the next one, Rise of Skywalker, and how she went from this major role to this, I think she's in it for like 5 minutes is the report. And so I was like, what's, like, just that pushback, it got me so upset. Like, I've never, taken agency over that Chinese half of myself, and so I got really upset about it. And that's when I really started looking into the history of like Asian representation in movies and film and theater and all these things, and how, people are representing us in yellowface and all this stuff. And again, I say us, like, I'm not, like I said, I'm not full, but I feel like, I've got that, my family who's Chinese are all moving out here from New York and things like that. So I just, for the first time, I started feeling pride and taking some agency over it. Like I said, I feel bad after decades of finally doing that, but it finally took a Star Wars movie of all things to, get me upset about that and get me involved. And you even wrote an article on that for Slashfilm, correct? On Kelly Tran's part in that movie.
Yes, that is correct. And I mean, I told a lot of people about this, but that article took 2 years to write.
Oh, wow.
Because at first it started out as a celebration until all that, the toxicity happened, and then I had to change the tone of it. But then eventually it was too depressing, so I just decided to shelve it. And this article, the final product, which will always be thankful for, the people at Slashfilm for taking a chance on it. I hope that it struck a balanced tone between the two. It's neither too depressing, it's not too depressing, but at the same time, it's not so much a celebration. But it's just a showcase of why it mattered, why everything mattered, and why everything could have been more. So
just an excellently focused piece. And again, I just felt, if you forgive me for saying so, I felt a connection with you. I was like, yeah, we're on the same wavelength here. It's like there's representation, we're all starting to feel it and push back against these things. So it's you being a voice and you becoming stronger, making that footprint, like making yourself known. It's just something to really, I've just loved watching. And so that's what I mean. It's like, keep doing what you're doing, because if you're an inspiration to me, you're going to be an inspiration to people that have an even stronger connection with you. I can't emphasize that enough. I hope you know that you're making a difference with people, and why it's an honor that you've been on, that you decided to accept our invitation to come on the show. I'm not trying to get you all teary-eyed, but I just want you to know that you are an inspiration to people. And again, it's great having you on. So,
well, when we brought you on during our 90s Palooza, and we had you pick a movie from the 90s. So if you could tell us what it is about movies from that decade that fascinated with, or what is it about the 90s decade that you like so much?
It's a damn good decade for films. I think film people related to film, filmmakers, film producers, so on and so forth, they were still in this mindset of, let's make let's make something that is kind of like answering our own what if scenarios, you know? So there were a whole lot of, uh how do we say it? Uh Liberties taken, as well as, kind of like risks. And we have a whole bunch of, things that, when you say it now to newer generations, they would be like, what, really? And then you actually, yes, we do, it was for real. For example, like Tom Cruise used to be a vampire, so that happened.
Yeah.
He might
uh
still be one. I don't know.
We don't know.
okay, let's not make it controversial here, folks. I mean, he might listen to this podcast and then he heard that and then he'll just shelve the last Mission Impossible, and then
Oh
we're gonna be in
no.
trouble. So,
Yeah,
but
we don't want
anyway,
that.
so it was just like creative adventures were planned out, and then they were taken, and then they were warmly received. Like, for example, I mean, uh I could still recall the moment that, my jaw dropped at all the effects of Twister.
Huh.
Yeah. And I mean, in retrospect, is that film really good? Not so much, but it was a spectacle. It still understands, the word spectacular. And you know and the 90s, it was full of that. And also, I guess the second primary reason, Johnny, is just that I'm a 90s kid. So there was this might sound a little bit silly, but then there's this realization that, wow, you know I was born during all these movies, all these kinds of movies were out. So you know pretty cool. I feel like I have kind of like a parasocial relationships with these films.
I like what you said about taking risks. Films took risks back then, because I agree with that 100%. I think they did. And I think nowadays they're not doing that so much. They're playing it safe more often than not. And I
Mhm.
think that's why I responded to movies back then too, because they took risks, because they were willing to go there. And they're not willing to do that nowadays.
They still do take risks, but with with extra consideration to trends and numbers. Back then, there wasn't such an extra bit. There wasn't such a suffix. It's just
Yeah.
let's take risks. Let's see what we can do. And of course, that produces a whole lot of things. Titles that we discuss about. David Fincher doing a let's say, I think one of his funnier films, The Game.
Mm.
One of his more unserious. Unserious is a better word.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Fincher. Or the Wachowski sisters, showing what they can do with Bound, and there was not a movie like that at the time, and it was just everything, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, Johnny and I talked, since we're doing this season, Johnny and I, that's where we cut our teeth. That's when we fell in love with movies. And that's what introduced us not just to 90s movies, but that's when I started watching 70s, 50s, silence, foreign movies, like everything. And it was the 90s that, even, we're talking about like movies are passed down, and the 90s, even though they were taking risks, a lot of times like movies are copies of other movies, and they're taking the same kind of ideas that we've been learning ever since the dawn of cinema, that kind of thing. We're just not so much recycling, but just using them in new ways. And so it's interesting. It's just, we're using all these ways to say different things. And now, like Johnny was saying, we're taking less risk because it's all about franchise stuff and legacy things, and leaning back on stuff that we're nostalgic for, to use a coin phrase there. But you know Johnny and I saw everything. It wasn't just the big blockbusters. We went out and watched, like, I don't know, Johnny, how many movies did you say we would go to see a week, even either together or separate?
I'd say 4 or 5, maybe sometimes 6 or 7. It was
Yeah.
every day.
And we're just
Wow.
absorbing them, and we didn't have kids or anything back, so we didn't have to kind of split our time up, so we had time for that. But yeah, it's like we saw everything because we didn't want to miss anything. And I think if we treated movies the same way back then that we treat them now, we would have missed out on a lot. And so, stuff like Luc Besson, like kind of segue into that. Like Nikita was a great like eye opener movie for me, right? Like Leon, the Professional. I think it was the Professional when they released it here, and then Leon was the International, which is the much better version of the movie. And you could see a lot of his themes and what he was going for there. So, if it wasn't for us seeing everything, I wouldn't have found Nikita. I wouldn't have found Leon. So, and then it wouldn't have led me to The Fifth Element, which, obviously was a big draw, was his name. But if you could tell us, like, you chose, basically we give our guests 3 choices of films. So that way Johnny and I can pick one that we're most excited to chat about. And the one that we settled on was The Fifth Element. So if you could tell us, like, what's your history with The Fifth Element? How did you come across it? How did you like get to watch it in the first place? What is your backstory with the movie itself?
So I think it all started when, I read a automobile magazine, and I used to be like obsessed with cars. And then there's this one issue contains a feature that is all about, some of the best car chases in film history per the title of the article. So, try not to rip it apart, guys. But among those is the taxi chase in in The Fifth Element. And I just thought that, from the little one capture of the film in that, and I was just so I got a whole lot of questions in my head. I was like, what? What is this? 1997? What kind of car is that? It looks like a taxi. I
Yeah.
know what yellow taxis in New York would look like, but none of them look like that.
Yeah.
But I just leave it aside. And then that year, when my aunt and uncle from France, I call them my dì ba and dưỡng ba, they came to visit people in Vietnam and then my family. And since they were going to be staying for a while, they bought a whole bunch of films to watch during their downtime, should they find any. And there were Saving Private Ryan, La Femme Nikita, Leon, and La Haine, and of course, Cinquième Element, which is the French title for The Fifth Element.
Huh.
And then I just thought, oh, wait, my brain's just doing this 2 plus 2 together. And then I just thought that, and then I just asked him, like, Dưỡng ba, my uncle, like, Dưỡng ba, can I borrow this? Can I watch this? And then he said, sure, And it was everything for me at that age. It was everything. It was adventurous, it was comedic, it was romantic, it was beautiful, it was sincere. It was just, this is cinema.
Yeah. So you didn't see it in the theater, you saw it on home video then?
Yes, because I think when film came out, I was just only 4 years old. And also, at the time, movie theaters in Vietnam wasn't such a big thing yet. The VHS market in Vietnam at the time was like huge, was like everything. So sometimes a film that would be like way old would suddenly be kind of like a new watch for a whole lot of us who would go out and buy VHS tapes. So fun fact, I actually learned about the Mummy and Deep Rising that way. And clearly Deep Rising was a movie that I was too young to watch, but I watched it anyway. I couldn't sleep for a couple of nights, but hey, it was it was something. It was something to remember.
Okay. And then Deep Rising, that's something that we probably won't be covering this season. But Stephen Summers, right? That's the Mummy connection there. But Jonny, what about your history with The Fifth Element? How did you see this in the theater, or like what was your history?
No, not in a theater. In fact, my first time seeing it all the way through was last night. I know I had seen like the first 20, 30 minutes of it like a few times, and I never really got all the way through it. Not sure why. All I know is like it never really engaged me as much as I wanted it to, and so like I was walking away or turning it off. But last night I sat through it all the way from start to finish, and I had a good time. I gotta say, it was fun. It was not necessarily my cup of tea. I wouldn't necessarily go out and pick this movie to watch, but I enjoyed myself. I had fun. It was fun to look at, and a lot of good to say about it.
Yeah. So you said that you saw 20 minutes. Is that just because you saw it on cable? Sorry if I missed that. What was, how did you just see those?
It might have just been like with some friends who maybe they were watching. I don't remember really. All I know was whenever it was on, I would never finish it all the way through. It was like just the first little bit. I get to the point where maybe they were getting ready to get on the plane, the vacation, and I'd leave, or something would happen. I don't remember much of it. I remember always seeing the scene where she comes, to life. When they, built and she gets the clothes. That part always stayed in my mind for some reason. Everything else I forgot about. But like I say, it was the first time all the way through was last night.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, that's a good perspective. So with me, like I said before, it was like knowing Luc Besson and then Bruce Willis, especially, that was the big draw. Like seeing Bruce Willis, and the way I think they marketed the movie as being an action spectacular. And so you see the part of him, the gunfire, shooting guns, then he jumps off the bridge or whatever on the ship. And then watching the movie was a different experience. I know, what do we call it? We call it like Blade Runner light. So instead of being in the dark, covered by rain, it's in the sunlight. Everything's so bright and poppy and colorful. And I just remember being wowed by the images I was looking at. Like, this is like, I've seen this, but I haven't seen this. Like, I haven't seen this in this kind of light. And then I don't remember anything other than that, other than when Chris Tucker's character shows up, it took me completely out of the movie. Like from the minute he shows up, as all of a sudden, like, he's just so loud, and it's like, it's so much, and the movie is already very French, that kind of, it's already got the sensibility, but with like an American. So I don't think they'd done anything like this big budget, like in France, that kind of thing. But it already has this over the top attitude. And then you bring Chris Tucker, his character comes in, and it's just too much. It was so much, and it was for so long, that it was like, that's what I remember. I remember just being, like I'm out. Like this, it took me out of the movie. So that's what I took a lot. And watching it again the other night is kind of Chris Tucker. He comes into the movie earlier than I remember, and so I really wrote down. I was like, oh no, Ruby Rohd. Like I had that as a note. And he comes in like earlier than I expected him to, and I was like, oh, so I braced myself. It was a little more. I was able to maybe enjoy it a little bit. So we'll talk about that. But anyway, so that's my experience with The Fifth Element. But if we wanted to go in and start chatting about, and when you said something about it's a movie that you're expected to involve yourself in, instead of it like just being something to watch, right? Just something to kind of wash over you. That's something that I want to talk about. Just a little bit of background on the movie, though, for people that don't know. I know that Besson wrote this when he was 16. He started like brainstorming ideas for it, and that was kind of to deal with his like being so lonely as a child, right? Is that something that you notice when is like watching the movie? Does it feel like a movie written by a 16-year-old? Is that surprising to people, you think?
It does actually. And I think when I first saw it, I was around 10 or maybe even 9. I couldn't remember, but I know that I was younger, that's for sure. Yeah. I guess I'm kind of like rephrasing what you're saying about it's a bit too much by saying that I guess from a kind of like a more useful mindset, it would be like it just opens up, it just opens things up, it just goes farther, it just goes farther and farther, and then it's just it just keeps on doing that. It just keeps on providing something for us to react to, and it doesn't give a damn pretty much like how we would react to it. But then it was just here's something for you, here's something for you, here's something for you all the time. it reflects the 16th age in the sense that it was boundless. It was just, it doesn't think that there's a limit to anything. It always thinks that something that you've already known can always be retooled to become something else that you don't. Please stop me before I turn turn this very popcorn film into something more existential than it envisions itself. So
Yeah.
things
Well,
like that.
we'll definitely get to that. So yeah, again, he wrote it when he was 16. That might explain that why Lilu is half naked throughout the whole movie, that kind of thing. That's that kind of mentality. I know that the divine language, he came up with that, but someone came up with that language, and then Jovovich kind of latched onto it and learned it very quickly. I think because she was like versed in like 4 different languages, like she could speak different languages fluently, and so she's able to pick that up to the point where they could write letters to each other and have full-on conversations with each other, just inventing this whole like language that was never heard before, right? And so that's again all this really good backstory and things like, and how he was able to bankroll this after Leon became such a big hit. Gary Oldman obviously being in Leon and being a big part of that, getting Bruce Willis to be part of the movie, so it all kind of bankrolled into this thing that he's able to get this giant budget from a major studio, and that's an awesome insight. Like it's giving you a lot to think about, right? It's giving you like, because that's the point I think is sci-fi movies, is it wants to create new worlds, right? It wants to give new things, and that's part of this is something that Jonny wanted to talk about, so maybe we can seek into this. But it's like it wants to give you things that are not normal, like the cigarettes. I laughed at how the filter is the nicotine is so small and the filter's so big. So it's that kind of thing. Everything is given kind of a different spin, so that you have to think about, oh, why is this different? Why is that different? I thought that was a very interesting way of getting at least your brain, maybe your left brain, interested in watching the movie. But Jonny, as far as production design goes, what was it that you wanted to chat about? Was it that most impressed you with the movie?
Well, like you were saying, did a really good job of world building in this movie, and that's the thing that impressed me the most. I wasn't as impressed with the story, and it is nice to know that he was so young when he wrote it, and he had that aspiration back then. But didn't Robert Mark Kamen come in and kind of help write the screenplay?
Yeah,
he wrote Taps, right? And he wrote some other.
I think Karate Kid. Yeah, he wrote that.
Kid,
So he was able
Um,
to tone it down and kind of more structure it, instead of it
yeah,
being like this big. I think 3 movies is really how Besson planned it. So they kind of squished it into one movie.
yeah, but I am impressed with the new language that they were able to create, because I was going to ask that question if it was real or just gibberish, because it sounds like just gibberish to me. But it's if it's something they created on their own, it's impressive that they were able to do that, and that she's able to, because that's the part that I was most impressed with as far as her performance goes, is her speaking that language. It was like, wow, that's pretty good. Because that's not an easy feat, I think, as far as acting goes. It's hard enough just to get the lines right in whatever language you're doing the movie in, but to do a whole other language that's just like a made up language, that's pretty cool. But as far as the production design and the world building, I love the color palette. I love that it was so bright, because I wasn't quite interested in the story and what I was being told. Like, it really didn't matter. It seemed like I was finding myself getting more and more engaged in what I was looking at. And so the colors were fun. I liked the costume designs. Who was that? John
Paul Gaultier, yeah, John Paul
Yeah.
Gaultier,
Yeah,
who should get a starring credit next to Bruce Willis, I think.
yeah. I mean, I know he's well known for doing like videos and stuff, like Madonna stuff and that kind of thing, but he did a good job. Like, I love the creativity that went into these costume designs, and what Gary Oldman had on his head, that whole plastic thing, and man, it was so creative and so different, and just so, like you say, I wasn't used to seeing that kind of design before, and so like, this is really interesting to look at. Like, it was really fun. And so the colors, the design, the cinematography, it was all, as far as the technical side of things, it was really well done.
Yeah, awe-inspiring, right? What did you think about you're nodding a lot, like your experience with the production design and the look of the movie? How do you feel about it today, especially?
To me, The Fifth Element is a kind of film where its designs are kind of like still in that era of, okay, here we have a presentation for you, dear audience, but however, if we can ask you to, do a little bit of work to try and connect to us, because we're not going to spoon feed you everything. that kind of that kind of sci-fi in that area. So it's it's a marvel. And also the fact that, again, going back to the story where, I first kind of like discovered the fifth element because it was in a car chase article. I just thought that, I keep having these dreams or these thoughts that, hey, maybe in the future cars are going to be like that. But lo and behold, we're in 2023, and cars are still not haven't been able to defy gravity yet.
Yeah, we should be a lot farther. Movies lied to us.
Yes.
Well, shout out to, I think, Dan Whale, I think is the guy that did the production design. I know you're talking about it's a mix of miniatures and CG, and it's everything that movies should be. Again, the production design reminded me of Metropolis, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and Blade Runner, obviously. Just the meshing of everything to create this world, right?
That's funny you mentioned Metropolis. I just watched that last week.
Yeah. a huge influence on science fiction ever since it came out in 26, and that's kind of the granddaddy of all these science fiction things. So yeah, you're talking about worlds like, if you look at the dystopian futures, like you're looking at the Matrix, you're looking at a bunch of how many movies that came out that had the future depicted as this like dystopian, like war zone. It looks so ugly and terrible, and this was like a bright poppy future where you could, it's so populated that everybody kind of lives in these little boxes where you could just, I think Roger Ebert said, like, everything is just within an arm's reach, like in your living space, right? To the idea that you can open your window and the restaurant comes to you, and he's he's chatting with the Chinese restaurant owner. He's eating lunch, and it's just such a fun idea, fun thing to look at, I think.
I latched onto your point there. I guess that is the most science fiction element in this whole sci-fi affair. It's just that, it took me a while to realize that. So Bruce Willis, Corbin Dallas is eating Thai food cooked by a Chinese with a Korean last name, and good fortune for you as a sign off.
Yeah.
What is this? So I mean, if we have time, we're gonna have to dive into the fact that, how it portrays Asians, but or even, like islanders. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll get some more time to talk about it. But let's just continue along now. So
the production is okay. Well, yeah, we'll put a pin in that. If I don't bring it back up, I want you to bring that back in, because we definitely have that conversation. But again, with the design of it, I didn't mention, it was funny doing the research and finding out that comic books are huge in France, right? To the idea that Besson was like, what are their names? I'm going to mess these up and I apologize, but Jean Mobius Giraud, who created like Blueberry, about the future cowboy, that comic strip. You've got Jean-Claude Mézières, who created Valerian, that Besson would later adapt and not be as successful or as popular with, doing that. So he went to them and he said, I'd like you to give me some designs. I want this to be in the spirit of your comics and your designs, but I also want to pay you for it. And so they're able to come in and brainstorm and have that personality to the point where people are like, oh, Fifth Element's ripped off these things, when in fact those two guys actually came and helped work on this to give it that kind of design. And then also going back to the Gautier thing, he created what, like 1,000 different costumes for extras. Like everybody has a story, it seems like. And he incorporates his trademark, like punk rock and lingerie and what was it, bondage gear even has a place, like in the costume design. But it's also they're gender fluid was the big thing. Like obviously Ruby Rohd comes in, and Prince was the inspiration. I think he was originally supposed to, they approached him to be that play that character first. But yeah, he's dressed like Prince. It's very gender fluid. It's like nothing. I just like the whole idea. It's if you turn your brain off and you just look at the movie, there's always something to look at, always something to stare at, and it's always just impressive from that technical side, Johnny, like you're talking about. So when you also wanted to talk about like the sound design, I mean, that's also something that we don't really, or the sounds that you hear, that's not something we usually, I think we take that for granted, to go along with the production design. What were your thoughts on that?
Right. And and just before I go into sound, I would like to, you know, kind of like add to your, you know, costume design comments a little bit. I just thought that, you know, it was very interesting that there's kind of like a, I think it would lean into, or maybe a little bit more kind of like a neighbor to the notion that the gender fluid concept in the costumes. It's just that so both Corbin and Lilu have orange hues as
Yeah.
their like as the primary hues on their costumes. However, it's kind of interesting because Lilu actually has more clothing on than Corbin at times.
Yeah.
You know, so
A
some
backless shirt.
food
Yeah,
for
yeah.
thought. Food for thought. You know.
That's interesting.
But anyway, going into the sound, like whoa. I don't think people have talked enough about the sound, or it's just only that I haven't found, you know, like essays on this yet. Of course, we have to credit the composer Eric Serra, and because the kind of music here is kind of like the long-winded version of it. I would say that the music in the film is distinctly of the time that it's made, and yet never quite dated. So it seems like instruments and musical elements that you know of are played or used in places that are strange, that are unfamiliar to you. I mean, have where else can you tell me that, you know, there's Algerian raye music in a NYC car chase, and
Yeah.
and apparently Italian opera equals to, you know, singing in alien vocals, or you know, uh there are like overt animal noises in the soundtrack as well. This film is as much an oral feast as much as it is a visual one. And you know, I would say that maybe even for the subsequent times that I would come back to this film, I would always try to, you know, pick apart or just pay a little bit more attention to the sounds, to the soundscape, even more than the visuals, because, well, mainly I guess because the visual is also so in your face, and I
Yeah.
just kind of like remember them by heart already.
Yeah. Well, I guess like if you're talking about the Serra's score, I know he worked with Besson before in Nikita and Leon and Subway, I think in Atlantis. He did the score for GoldenEye, obviously, which is where I remember him from. It's very to the I mean, he's got this, it's a signature sound, I think, that I've heard in all of his movies. It's like this synthesized bell sound that I really noticed in GoldenEye. And then I really noticed this time. And then watching clips in Nikita before we recorded, like I could hear it in there. So he's got this signature sound, but it suits the note that I have is like this music doesn't really match the imagery or the action, like you were talking about the song that plays during the chase scene, right? I'm like, this doesn't match. It's not what I'm used to. And it's off-putting at first because you're like, this isn't matching. Like Johnny and I did an episode on Lady Hawk. You remember, Johnny, where the music did not match the images at all, and we're like, this doesn't, so it took you out of the movie. But now that I think about it, the way that it kind of doesn't match those, it makes it more memorable, and it has more of a personality. Again, it's that avant-garde kind of attitude that it could be a detriment while you're watching. I think that's why a lot of people like they either call it the best summer movie they've seen or the worst summer movie they've seen, and just because they might be pushing back against that avant-garde feel. What do you think about that?
I mean, I would agree because this is an absolutely a novel experience, because rarely do European productions would, one, dabble in something this huge, and two, dabble in something this huge with the concept of, you know, portraying Hollywood or portraying American culture.
Yeah.
So it's so obviously it's going to ruffle some feathers, and you know how you feel afterward about that, you know, that's entirely you, but then you know that it will do that, and it's meant to do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the representation for the Asian representation for a little bit. That's very interesting because it brought up some ideas. Like Blade Runner obviously integrates that Asian feel to the point where he's talking, you know, in an Asian kind of maybe a jumbled language. I can't remember if they were actually speaking Chinese or Japanese, or if they just kind of jumbled it. Same thing with Serenity recently, you know, just or the Firefly series, how they brought a lot of that influence in. What was some of the representation, like the ideas that you could see in this movie like at play?
Overall, I would say that I just have like two words for, you know, all of the, you know, Asian elements in the film, and they are like not good.
Yeah.
It still, you know, leans into this narrative that, you know, they like how we look, they like our aesthetics, but then they hate the creator of said aesthetics. So, you know, the fifth element kind of like does that under the guise of, you know, it's I am bringing the entire world together in this future, which it does. But however, does it? But you know, Asians got the kind of like I say, if I remember correctly, the saying being like got the bitter deal out of that, because you know, in here, the note that I have is just that, you know, Asians are still a barely there or subservient element. You know, whenever you see an Asian in the film, they're always serving something, or they're always serving somebody, or you know that they live and die by the presence of Bruce Lee. You know, just having Bruce Lee and, you know, just having martial arts, and that, and they were like, "Yep, that's the Asian box ticked."
Oh, yeah.
And other than that, I would also, you know, like stretch this out to, you know, the Pacific Islander, you know, members as well, because the film, despite being kind of like set way into the future and, you know, commit to this notion of going farther and farther, the extent, you know, the film's extent of paradise or understanding what paradise is, it remains Hawaii, you know. So
Yeah.
that's not far enough. Not far enough for that particular place. But you know, I also have, you know, posit this let's just say, for the lack of a better word, like argument, like all of this over baking of quote unquote non all American elements, does it represent the ignorance of the times or innocence of the French? And, you know, are they that linked either? Is there a connection between them? I like to say yes, but of course, I guess if I do that, then we're gonna have to have another sub episode for this one. So
Yeah, that's a loaded topic, and I absolutely agree with you. It's like a lot of times they latch onto the aesthetics without understanding why, like the underlying point of why they're latching onto it. Like, is it just the surface level stuff? Before we go into my topic that I wanted to, did you have anything else you wanted to add for like representation?
it's just the whole film is a whole lot about, you know, things being in sync and then things being out of it at the same time. So I would just say, you know, if there's anything else I have to say about representation, I guess that, you know, there are certain interesting things that it posits, you know, from the perspective of, you know, we are French, we are foreigners, and here are the things that we think about America, or, you know, specifically like futuristic America.
Yeah.
It seems like, you know, no matter how far into the future we get, you know, if a thing is evil or whimsy, said thing will have a certain accent, or it comes from the South. Zork, you know,
Yeah.
Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
And however, I would just say that, you know, I give them credit that there's kind of like a respect and an element of cooperation with indigenous peoples and cultures. Like at the end of the day, you know, the denizens of the fifth element would realize that, you know, civilization cannot progress or happen if they don't look back and respect and ask for participation from civilization's origins.
Yeah. again, food for thought, right? Definitely something that, like the rest of the movie, it gives you something to think about. And that again, that comes down to what I wanted to chat about here. My topic, if I wanted to give it a title, would be, just because there's meaning written into the script, does that make the movie automatically meaningful? Because, like, I think one of the things that I push back on watching it a couple times, the thing that's making it clear, and I want to watch it again so I can maybe approach it from a stream of consciousness point of view, is, since I'm a big story person, I want to engage with the story, and that's really not the kind of movie that this is. It's more of a vibe movie. It wants you to kind of, go along with, from set piece to set piece, and kind of let it wash over you, and it's more of a mood thing, right? But there is meaning to the movie. If we're to find and lock into one scene, it's that scene between Oldman's character and Ian Holm's character.
Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg.
Right.
And
the Father Cornelius?
Vito Cornelius.
So they have the scene where Zorg captures him. They have the scene in the office, and it's the whole theme of the movie is laid out there. So basically, you have this evil entity that's heading towards Earth. You have Lilu, who's like the fifth element, who represents peace and growth and life and things like that. And that's what Zorg and Cornelius are representing. Like, Father Vito is life, like he's peace, and you want to bring peace to the world, right? And then Zorg is all about destruction and death. But they have the conversation where Zorg is like, look, like we're after the same thing. Like, just because you're after life, the people that you worship, right? The guys that brought this, they're taking the sarcophagus in the beginning, the Mondashoans, who had a very Return to Oz vibe, is what I was getting from them. But they have a weapon, like a mass destruction, to fight this evil. So even though they're peace, they have a destructive weapon. And then Zorg talks about, like, you have this glass, like if I spill something, like all of a sudden people come out, and if I break this glass, like all of a sudden people are going to come out, and I've basically employed or put things to use to come and pick up my mess that I've made. So destruction brings life. It reminded me of Noah's Ark. God destroys the earth to kind of cleanse it, and it's destruction, but it breeds life. And to the idea that, like, he chokes on a cherry, and I thought it was funny because, so yeah, the Mondashoans have that weapon of destruction, and then Zorg is trying to, even though he traffics in destruction, it will end up bringing new life, and like that is that kind of idea. And then he chokes on the cherry, and Father Vito, like, he enjoys that he's choking on it a little bit too much, I think, and so before he does the Heimlich or pats him on the back and gets the cherry out, but it's like, there's that dichotomy of good versus evil where they're kind of both after the same. I just thought that was very interesting, and that's what the whole movie comes down to, with the element, like, and love, and like bringing new life and stuff like that. But does that get lost in all of the Chris Tucker of it all and the production design of it all? Do you guys think that, Johnny, we'll go to you first, like, what do you sense that meaning for the movie? Is that something you gleaned from it? Does it support that theme at all?
I could tell they were trying to tell me something, but I didn't know what it was. Like, I know I'm supposed to get something out of it. I'm not sure what that is. I don't know. I mean, the meaning was kind of lost on me. Like I say, my eyes glazed over, and like I said, I was enjoying what I was seeing, so I was engaged enough to keep watching, but I didn't really care what they were trying to tell me. It was weird. It was a weird experience because like I said, I know I tried to watch it before but failed, and so this time it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to go all the way through, and just I don't know, it didn't really didn't hook me in like I wanted it to, and then the meaning was lost. So I could not find meaning in it.
Yeah. Do you agree though that they're like you said, they're trying to go for something?
I can say they're trying, yeah.
Right, but then he chokes on the cherry and it becomes a comedy scene, and so the meaning kind of gets swallowed up, so to speak. But what do you think?
It does that, it does exactly that. And because, it has dedicated scenes or moments where, they say exactly what they mean. The film moves at the pace where it was like, we just want to have fun. Let's be fun. And then at one point it was just like, math. We have a point to make. What is the point that we can make? And so I totally get where both of you came from. However, I think maybe, at one point, Luc Besson watched the 1981 adult animation Heavy Metal, and he fell in love with the segment Harry Canyon, and seeing that, and then he just thought, let me try and make a sunnier version of this one, and also maybe hire the same artist as well.
Yeah.
So maybe, and again, going off of Harry Canyon, I remember it being introducing me to a very different kind of New York, and it was also very violent. It was also very dark, and at the same time, it was also uh abrupt, but in a good sense, But then there's nothing more to tell about it. So I just thought that maybe Besson watched that, and then he just thought that maybe I can add some meaning to it. Maybe I can do something more to this one, and hence we have this very we have this very popcorn kind of film that you know does everything popcorn, maybe goes a little bit overboard with the popcorn, and then at the same time it realizes that hey, I need to insert some meaning, I need to tell something, and then voila, there we go, we got it.
Yeah, it's ideas begetting ideas begetting ideas, right? Like it's everybody feeding off each other and kind of spinning those into new kind of visions, kind of thing. And that's symbiotic relationship, coming back to that same thing with the good versus evil kind of thing. So yeah, like I said, I think the meaning is there if you're looking for it, but it's more of a stream of consciousness movie. It's more of a vibe movie. It's like, yeah, all that stuff, we can latch onto that, but it's more of a pretty movie to look at. And so it's all these images are things that you soak in, and the sound you soak in. But if we wanted to seek into the performances really quick, what did we think about? I guess we could talk about Willis, obviously. We could talk about Jovovich. We could talk about Oldman, obviously, and Chris Tucker, especially. I did like that Tiny Lister showed up as President Lindbergh. So that was close to, it sounded, I could almost put myself in there, being just one vowel off with our names and everything. But if we're talking Bruce Willis, he's you want to get people in the theaters in your weird French sci-fi movie, like you put Bruce Willis in it, like regular Joes are going to want to come see it. How did we feel about Bruce Willis? What do you think of his performance in this one?
I would love to borrow the phrase in that Speed episode that you did, a diehard clone.
Okay.
This one is, I don't know if the diehard clone is the right term here, but I kind of feel like that in Corbin Dallas. It's just a much sunnier John McClane, and but then still that it still relies on his, like, I'm too old for this crap, like kind of vibe.
Yeah.
He's having a whale of a time with this one, and I don't think it's ever been confirmed, but him had a stare down with the "Gimme the Cash" thief, played by Matthew Katsovitz.
The guy that wore the picture of his haul as a hat, like
yes. Both of you remember that bit where
so weird.
He was like, I take it, I don't need it, and then it turns back into Willis, and then he just he couldn't hold it in, and then he was just smiling, and then he just said, "That's a nice hat." I thought that, I guess that was a ruined take, but then they just decide to leave it in because it was so charming. Speaking of charm, Bruce Willis has it in spades, so it's it's just fun, and everybody was having fun on set. Well, apparently not Oldman after the fact, but he's in that period where like old English man yelling at clouds. So
yeah, I like the running gag. It's that Bruce Willis, like, Corbin collects guns for people that try to rip him off, like he has an actual. I thought that was really clever and funny. But Johnny, what did you think about Bruce Willis in this? Do you think he plays a good John McClane?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, if I'm being honest, I think it's just Bruce Willis being Bruce Willis. This is what he's good at. This is what he does, and so I enjoy watching him in this. He did a good job.
Yeah, it's the charisma, right? That he's just the Bruce Willis charisma that you want. And when you're right, he's got that charm. He's got that in spades. And then let's talk about Oldman, because Gary Oldman's one of those guys. I think he's one of my favorite actors because he's just so willing to go for it. Like I wrote down here, like every decision that he's making, from the hat to the soul patch to the accent to the limp or whatever, is a choice, and Oldman's going for it. To hear Oldman say, I think the quote is like, "Oh, I can't stand it. He just did it as a favor for Besson because after he was in Leon, like Besson helped fund like Nil by Mouth, that kind of thing." And then he came in. I don't. It's weird watching his performance because Oldman is all in. He's not detached. He's not like bored. Like every decision that he makes is full on 120%. I don't know. He's kind of like Bugs Bunny. I don't know. He's kind of a Bugs Bunny-ish character. It just seems like he's to the, and they don't even meet. That's the funniest thing is you have the good guy and the bad guy. The most interaction that they have is that Zorg says, "Yeah, fire all these guys, fire these millions of people," and then like Bruce Willis gets fired from his job. Like that's the most conflict that they have in the movie, and then they kind of miss each other. I don't know what did you think of? Do you agree with that? Do you think Oldman's all in? Does it seem like he's not having a good time there to you?
That's the thing. I think he's lying, or I think he's just having a moment, you
Yeah.
know. But other than that, I mean, everybody was having fun on this set, and the fact that the fun vibe that was exuding, that was just oozing from the screen. The odds are, that somebody, doesn't have to be Oldman, but then somebody is displeased with the production. It was just so low. Oldman was just memorable, and not only because of that plastic comb over too, Johnny. The way that he delivered, if you want something done, do it yourself. I did that in my life. I use it, real world application. I would
Yeah.
do that little pause like I'm just, grabbing something heavy, but then there was nothing on my hand. But then I would always say is that, oh, okay, if you want something done, do it yourself. Always that little pause. So Oldman in this, he was just everything. He was just, again, a lot. But then I think that there may have been some like implied competition on the set on being like, all right, can you outmaneuver your co-star? So
Yeah, everybody seemed to be all in. There's not like a lazy out of it performance. Like even Brian James, it was nice seeing him in here. You had that Blade Runner connection, but like seeing him play a comedic role instead of a villainous role. Like even he was kind of willing to be goofy and all that. But Johnny, what we talked about Oldman before. What do you think about him in this as Zorg?
Well, I love Gary Oldman, and he always gives 110%. And so I think he was great. And I love when he does characters like this, like when he just is quirky and weird and just strange, like the pimp in True Romance, or when he does not strange, but like just when he's really just all in and serious. Like remember Air Force One? He was the terrorist, the main bad guy. He was so good in that. Like those are the kind of roles that I like seeing Gary Oldman do. And so when he does these types of roles, I'm always fully on board with it, and I love watching him do it.
Yeah. Bram Stoker's Dracula is another one. He just Sid Vicious. He just disappears into these roles, and he's so good at playing these villainous, over the top characters. And to bring it back to Batman Begins, to see him play a down to earth, good hearted, soulful character, and also Sirius Black in the Harry Potter movies was so refreshing. Just to see him like play earnest and play sincere instead of over the top. You're right, Johnny. He has this over the topness that we love to watch, but he also exudes this warmth. And it was so fun seeing that come out in Harry Potter and as Commissioner Gordon.
I did have the question though, why does he have a Southern accent? Like I couldn't figure that out. I was like, they don't answer that and they don't explain it. But it's like, okay, we're going Southern, I guess.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, like this film has a whole lot of like interesting and potentially problematic POVs about America from a Frenchman perspective. So, if anything is weird, if anything is evil, it would have a Southern accent. So there we go.
That's just how we're either like action stars or we're country yokels. Like it's one or the other, right? That's kind of his attitude that he has. So so seeding over to Milla Jovovich. Again, it's Milla, right? Not Mia. I hope I'm getting that right. She's in here, and then I'll just say this, and then we'll go to you guys. But I think it's a great physical performance that she's putting on. She's always doing something interesting. And it was funny watching her this time because I was getting serious Margot Robbie vibes from her. Like if they made this today, that's who would play Lilu. It would be Margot Robbie. I just think she has a look. It just seemed very Margot Robbie-ish, like in the way that she's willing to go to these weird places, and she's obviously beautiful to look at. But she's obviously got this talent going on. I don't know. What do you think about that? Did you see any Margot Robbie, or is that just me? I just think that she's only done the Resident Evil movies, Jovovich, but I kind of think that she's like maybe the B movie equivalent of Margot Robbie. I hope that doesn't sound bad. What do you think about that?
Um, I think well, all I would say now is that you just gave me kind of like another opportunity to rewatch The Fifth Element, maybe right after this podcast even. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Just to double check on that Margot Robbie aspect. But however, I mean, I don't think I see that. However, I would dare say that Lilo Dallas Multipass is one of, if there is something that we would always try to remember Milla Jovovich by, this is the performance. This is it. Because while was it good enough for the Academy or something? No, maybe not. No, but however, it just fits how we would think of a sci-fi lady, just beautiful, but at the same time innocent, uh, lethal, but warm, if you know what I mean. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that all the crushes that certain people would have for certain Final Fantasy characters. This is it. Like this is the live action kind of like variant of that. But obviously, we're not talking about Final Fantasy. We're talking about Fifth Element. And Milla Jovovich, she was that as being Lilu. She was the crush that a 16-year-old boy would have. I cannot imagine anyone else playing Lilu except for Milla Jovovich. So I guess apologies to Margot Robbie and your observation, I guess. So
again, that makes sense. It's just I just think like if they were going to recast it, you want to put Margot Robbie in here because she's willing to go places that Jovovich is going here. Like there's some quirks, like even when she's fighting the Mandalores, when she's having that fight scene with him, she's got a quirkiness to her that it's not just one dimensional. There's stuff going on. And, again, this is an extension of Nikita. It's an extension of Lucy that Besson would do later. It's the strong female, kick-ass warrior kind of thing. But there's also that warmth to her that I think is very important. Jonny, what did you think about Jovovich?
Well, I thought she was great in this. Like I mentioned before, her learning that new language that they created, I thought that was really impressive. I thought there was an intensity to the performance too, and the way she delivered those lines when she was like, confused and first brought, awake, and she was all the physicality she was doing, everything kind of came together, and she did a really good job with it. I've always liked her. I know she's been in a couple movies I really enjoyed. The Fourth Kind, this movie about hauntings in Alaska or whatever. I thought she was great in that movie. And then she was also in what's that other one? Zoolander.
Yep. she's willing to go places. I just think that if she's married to Paul W.S. Anderson, so all she's doing is like Resident Evil movies. Like if you give her the chance, like I think she can give a.
Didn't she marry Luc Besson? Didn't she get married?
Yeah. He was he was married to who was it? It was
Mai Wen, the actress playing the diva Lava Laguna.
Yeah, he was either married to her, or engaged to her, and then after the movie, like I guess they split up, and then he did marry Jovovich. I think maybe just 3 years is all they lasted. 2 years, yeah. So it's very short kind of celebrity marriage there. But yeah, someone give her a chance. She's willing to, like you said, to come in and kind of wow us and do this kind of thing again. It's very distinctive. So the last thing we'll talk about, and then we'll kind of get our final thoughts on the movie here. Like we got to talk about Chris Tucker.
So I would say that, if my theory that there's that, implied competition on the set about, try to outmaneuver your co-star is true.
Yeah.
Chris Tucker wins every single match. So,
without contest. Yeah.
Yes. And to this day, I'm not even sure if I dig Ruby Rohd. However, I will say that there was a point in time where I memorized every single line from Ruby Rohd.
Oh,
I know, annoying, right? Do you want me to do that now? No.
yeah, go for it.
No, I won't. But the thing is, it's just it's very interesting, especially the fact that when you know whether before seeing the film or afterward, but generally afterward, you realize that they wanted Prince to be in this role. So I don't I don't know. Were they trying to, uh coax Prince into doing something different? Or were they trying to introduce some quote unquote class into, uh the Prince rendition of Ruby Rohd? It's just a whole lot of questions that we'll never get the answer to, because obviously, Prince didn't play this role with Chris Tucker. But for this character, I just thought that I don't even know what to say. Whether it's just like, is this playing up a trope? Is this, the my aforementioned overbaking of non-all-American elements? Or is this just, everybody's just really getting loose and just actually like having fun, you know, getting
Yeah.
people to, lick their stamps and then send the letters back to mama, because, from 5 to 7, you're gonna know it all about, D-man, my man. It's just okay, I'll shut up. Okay, nobody's telling me to shut up. Why?
No, it's fascinating. We could do a whole podcast on Ruby Rohd. That's the thing. Like, again, and it ties in with Besson. Like, we're either stoic action stars, we're either Southern hicks, or we're so loud and obnoxious that we kind of suck all the energy out of a room. Like, it's interesting thinking about, is that the idea behind every character? Is it the French guy's point of view of Americans? I don't know. Before I'm trying to figure out a way to be positive here. Before I give my opinion on Chris Tucker, Jonny, what do you think? Especially since you didn't watch the movie in full until just now, basically.
Yeah.
What did you think of him?
Well, even though I will say his performance is kind of jarring and it is out there and it is over the top, it's interesting and it was kind of fun. There were some moments where he would make me laugh, and so I know that high pitched scream he would do, and like it was so out there that it was like that was kind of funny, and so I can see the appeal to it, but I also see why it can be considered like too much. But Chris Tucker went there, and I think he was pretty good.
Yeah, when I think you're right, like he wins the contest every time. It's like there's no, like, Oldman's trying, but there's only so much Oldman can do, right? And so it's
all right. Tell me this, Darin. How green was he?
Oh,
Super green.
super green. Oh my gosh.
Any green you want.
Any green you want. Okay, so I think my problem, I don't mind. Again, he's a memorable character. I'm not going to forget Ruby Rohd. I didn't forget him. When he showed up in here, I was like, oh no. And I knew his name, right? He made that much of an impact. I just think that since he becomes a supporting player instead of just part of the scenery, like he doesn't just come in and like give a scene and like, oh, that character was crazy and now there's no more of him. He's like there. Once he shows up, he's there and he's a part of it. And the parts that did make me laugh was when he's so gung-ho and he's so like level 13, like out of level, and he's trying to get Corbin to interact with him, and all Corbin is like, how does it feel to be part of this world? And all Corbin is thrilled, and he says, I thought that stuff was really funny because he didn't know how to deal with that. But it was he's so much in the movie that it's just an acquired taste, I think, is all. I don't know if like he was just doing things and people were just guffawing on set, and so Besson was like, yeah, just go for it. Everybody thought it was funny. It's just an acquired taste. I don't know, like, so I guess that's my thing. Instead of just being part of the upholstery, he was a supporting active player. So he even shows up at the end to affect one of the elements. So he's that strong of a presence in the movie, and it's just you either go with them or you don't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it gets to a point where, if he tells you somehow that you have no fire, no energy, you actually have no fire or energy. You
Yeah.
best you best believe that. So it's
Yeah.
uh
So he definitely made an impression. I guess that's the positive that I could come back with. But like we talked about, this movie is a lot. Like there's so much with the production design and so much with some at least with the performances and the sound and the music, and the diva dance section is entrancing, and it was something that I'm never going to forget. It's something that didn't feel like anything else that I'd seen. And so even though I push back against Ruby Rohd, he's memorable. Like I'm never going to forget him. And that has to do a lot with Chris Tucker selling the movie, like Bruce Willis selling it on his Bruce Willisisms, like the stoicism, the charisma. Milla Jovovich putting in this, you know, awards. I think it's an awards worthy performance. It's this physical performance that she's putting in that you don't forget about. Ian Holm, even though he just all I could hear is his voice is Ash from Alien whenever he would monologue, but he's he's a part of it. He's rushing around and he's doing all these pratfalls, and so he's just part of the texture of the movie. And
Hey,
so
real
that's
quick,
yeah.
did Ian Holm actually forget the name of the character when he walks into Dallas's place? And he says Mr. Willis, doesn't he? Like I thought I heard him say Mr. Willis, and then Bruce Willis corrects him and says Dallas. He's like, oh, Mr. Dallas. Was that an accident that got left in, or was that on
that's
purpose?
that's also a contested detail, Johnny, because the subtitles of the copy of the film that I have, it actually has like Mr. Wallace, so
Oh,
Wallace.
I thought I heard him say Willis. So I was like, what? He called him Willis?
Yes, but still, even if it was that, it was an outtake that was deliberately left in, and but for great effect because it increases the charm of the thing by tenfold with a whole
Yeah.
lot of charming people around. Like earlier when we mentioned about that outtake with the him cracking up with the "give me the cash" thing.
Yeah,
It's
maybe it's just your problem with British accents, Johnny. Maybe you just heard Willis.
Yeah.
Well, what were your final thoughts on the movie, if you had any?
Well, like I said, I enjoyed it. It's a fun movie. It's very entertaining. It's fun to look at. I do agree with you. The sound's good. The music's good. Everything in it came together as far as the technical side of things. And some of the acting's great. I think Milla Jovovich was great. Bruce Willis was, with Bruce Willis. But everybody did a good job, and it came together. I had a hard time following the story. I found I didn't really care so much about what they were trying to tell me, and so I would tune out. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely a movie I would recommend because it's just so well done technically. So I would say it's worth remembering on that aspect alone.
And then for the final word, since you brought The Fifth Element to us as one of your choices, like what would your final thought on the movie be?
If either of you ever get the chance to become a professor of sci-fi filmmaking class, I would say this is a good case study, if that's the right word to apply to it, because there's just, again, deriving from the fact that there's just a whole lot of things going on at once in this film. It's a proper education on everything, on how you would be able to interact and then build this world. It's, again, and the point that I would keep emphasizing, it's just that this is a pretty good, uh maybe even to me, because it affected me so greatly. This is the prime example of sci-fi filmmaking that still leans toward the audience to do some work with gleeful abandon, rather than today where it's all mainly the other way around, or it's the kind of you know fictional storytelling that is more focused on transportation rather than superimposition, as in like getting you as far from reality as it possibly could, as it cinematically could, as opposed to getting you to a place, but then still anchoring you in reality. So, exposition, certain things make sense, some realism. This here doesn't do any of that. Or, it could just be simply a good case study in, flow. And to me, flow in filmmaking is different to pacing, because pacing can be erratic, but then, you need to have your film move in a certain way so that it can, at the very, foundational level of it all, have your attention. And The Fifth Element is a good case of that, with, Luc Besson having very fun with the editing, like the back and forth conversation between two different places, or, just in movement, where Zorg's introduction, where he exits the scene from the left, but then we move to the next one where David enters from the right,
Yeah.
or, or if not through mash cuts, then through other cinematic elements like sound, like we discussed earlier on. Or, to borrow a point that Johnny mentioned earlier, this is this is, this is a film that you can put on mute and still be impressed by it, because it's so visually scrumptious. And the fact that, except for the parts where devices in the film with a heads-up display that are clearly pieces of plastic with printed images on it, other than that, it was just world building. And again, the basis of it is just to have fun, and there's still a display of understanding of what big screen spectacle is all about.
Absolutely. So, Gwen, again, thank you for gracing us with our presence for this. The one thing that I've loved, and Johnny feels the same way, is every conversation that we've had, either with each other or with our guests, has been so eye-opening, so deep and meaningful. And it's funny, like The Fifth Element, like sitting down and watching it, it's funny that we're able to sit down and have like a almost a 2-hour conversation on like the meanings of it and everything, and what makes this movie the movie, right? And so the last thing I'll say here is that we need more representation, not just in films, but in film criticism. We need to have somebody to come in and understand like representation of these stories are being told, and knowing that there's somebody out there that's got a voice, who's representing me and representing the people that I love and that mean a lot to me. We need that representation to be able to, bring voices out and bring attention to these things. And you being a part of the and so you just did an intro for like Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, right? Where you talked about Children of the Mist, and I apologize if I'm getting but the works of Ha Lei Jiang, right? Is that
good?
Like her work? Okay,
9 out of 10.
Okay, perfect.
9 out of 10.
You doing that and bringing attention to her work, and we need that, and I'm so grateful that you're out there, and I really think you're making a difference. You just have to look, like we mentioned at the top of the podcast, and Johnny was like shaking his head. I could, like, because of all of the outlets and the websites that I was making, you're part of a lot, and so your footprint is there, and you're making a difference. And I just want to tell you that I really appreciate that you're out there, and keep on going. We'd love to have you back every week, and we've just got so many people that we love talking to, so we definitely want to have you back. But Wen, if you could let our listeners and our viewers know, how can they find you and read these wonderful articles and these wonderful experiences? How can they get in touch with you and get to learn more about you? How can they reach you?
All right. So before I throw down my deeds, I just want to say, Darin, Johnny, thank you so much for the kind words, and above all that, thank you for noticing and recognizing my footprint. So I would just like to say that, sincerely, thank you, thank you, thank you. And just 3 thank yous aren't enough, but that's all you're gonna get, because we're running late. Anyway, on Twitter, I am at NLE318. Over on Facebook, I am Nguyên.Le.334. Yes, I know. I memorized my profile on Facebook. Very sad, but we'll talk about that later on. And over on Instagram, I am the Viet Who Viet. It's actually a pun on the Vietnamese who writes, but then Viet and Viet is actually the same letters. Anyway, it's TheVietWhoviet. So Yeah,
Awesome.
that's me.
Awesome. Yeah. You're out there. Thanks for bringing you to our podcast. Definitely, I'm going to extend that invitation. We'd love to have you back on just to chat about something else. This Nguyên Lê, this has been, again, it means so much that you're able to come on here and have this chat with us. And I look forward to conversations in the future. Everybody check him out. You're going to make a difference. And yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
No, I just want to say that thank you, thank you to you, Darin, Jonny, and NostalgiaCast, for seeing my hand being raised all the way at the back of the class, because I believe that I am a multi-pass property, and then you recognize me for what I am is just, like so freaking honored, honored and humbled. There we go.
Well, I think we have to get it's multipass, right? Multipass.
I know I am a multi-pass.
There you go. All right. Nguyên, thank you so much. We'll chat. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. We're cutting a commercial. Commercial. So.
Commercial! Break for 30 seconds.
And welcome back again. Want to extend a special thank you to Nguyên Lê, a professional film critic from all over. Like we mentioned before, it was great having him on and great talking about representation and just being able to talk about the influence that he's had and inspiration that he's been to so many people, including myself. So I thought it was funny talking to him afterwards, because he was saying he doesn't appear on too many podcasts because people are intimidated by him. And I thought that was strange. Like, intimidated by when? Like, it doesn't seem like he'd be the kind of guy you'd be intimidated by. He seems like somebody you want to have a lot of conversations with. Like, he's just one of the guys.
Yeah. So if you want him on, hit him up. He'll come on.
And he'll give you some good insight. He's eager to share his POV. So yeah, definitely, we'll want to have him back for sure. So we appreciate that conversation. So just for now, since we talked for a little bit for so long, I think we'll forego our usual top three and the countdown stuff. But I did want to talk about Bruce Willis. I know we talked about him during Pulp Fiction, but as far as an influence, I know, like with Moonlighting, like that's where he started, and then he kicked off with Die Hard, and he became this, this superstar. Not overnight. Like, he tried and he paid his dues, and he was just the man. Like I said before, like The Fifth Element, aside from Luc Besson, that was the reason I went to go see the movie. Right? I mean, what are your thoughts on Bruce Willis as an actor, as a person?
Well, I like him. I kind of grew up with him. I remember movies like Blind Date and movies like Hudson Hawk, and so I knew who he was. And it wasn't until Die Hard came out that, like I say, like you said, that kind of started his career and kind of like shot him into superstardom. And I thought he was good in Die Hard, and I really liked the John McClane character. But then it seemed like he was always playing that character in every movie he did. He was just Bruce Willis being Bruce Willis. Yeah. And so I wanted to point out a movie that I thought he was exceptional in, because it was the one movie where he didn't play himself. And that was, maybe not the one, but it's one of the ones. That's 12 Monkeys. And I bring it up a lot because I love this movie. And I think it just shows that he went to a different level in this movie. He actually was a different character, and he portrayed something that he's not used to doing. And so I really respect him for that. I thought 12 Monkeys was an awesome performance. And then, of course, you got Butch in Pulp Fiction, and you can't go wrong with the John McClane and the Die Hard movies. So he's definitely a force to be reckoned with, and he's a good actor. So he's done some good work.
Yeah, like we talked about, he's got charisma. 12 Monkeys, you're right. Like, he, a lot of actors, they coast in their persona. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why we go see Cary Grant did that. I know we mentioned that before. John Wayne did that. You went to go see a John Wayne movie. You wanted to see him play John Wayne, but every now and then he did kind of reach the different Howard Hawks movies, Red River, Searchers, that kind of thing. Bruce Willis is the same. Like, I agree with you. If we're talking about his most iconic performances, I mean, Die Hard, obviously. The reason John McClane became such a household name is because he wasn't Schwarzenegger. He wasn't Stallone. He was this everyman that we could identify with. And he was in a situation where he was just talking to himself because there's nobody else to talk to. He was making jokes, and it made him so human. He wasn't just the muscle-bound meathead hero. He was an actual human being. And I think he nailed, we can talk about maybe Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken, who had he wasn't a muscle-bound person either, but he was still kind of larger than life and a caricature. John McClane, at least in that first Die Hard, maybe the third one, is like I said, he's us. And so it's easy to identify with him. Pulp Fiction is another one. Like, just being able to be a part, like we talked about the lexicon and being a movie that basically defined the 90s and have Bruce Willis in there. And again, I think he had the charisma and he had like the heroism, like going back into saving Marcellus. But I think too, Butch in Pulp Fiction was another stepping outside himself performance. So that's his second iconic. And then The Sixth Sense. You have to mention The Sixth Sense is because he was that made such a cultural stamp and it was everywhere. And he was a part of that. He did play, spoilers if you haven't seen Sixth Sense, he did play dead pretty well. So, the thing with Bruce Willis is that he did start playing himself. And then after a while, I think he just stopped. I think Red, which is a fun movie, Morgan Freeman and John Malkovich and Mary Louise Parker and Helen Mirren and Brian Cox is in there, Richard Dreyfuss. We talk about Willis kind of just phoning it in. I think in Red, you can't do that with all those stars. So he's a lot of fun in that one, but maybe that was the last time he really made it. Maybe Moonrise Kingdom, obviously being a part of that from Wes Anderson was good.
That's a different character as well.
Right. But then he earned this reputation for just showing up in direct-to-video like cheapies, and people started making fun of him for being not caring and not being present. And I'm not trying to throw any podcasts or YouTubers or critics under the bus, but we did notice that there was kind of a lowering in quality, but then we realized that he was suffering from aphasia, which is a form of dementia. I think in March 2022, so last year, his family said that he was retiring from acting because he suffered from a form of dementia. And then just a couple months ago, he was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, so full-on dementia. I don't know if that's right. So he hasn't had all his faculties. I know there's been stories of like he'd be on set and he would just seem lost. And he asked somebody a question. I know what you're doing here, but what am I doing here? And there was the question of, is he just being used to get an easy paycheck? He's just memorizing lines. And so a lot of people are like backtracking and apologizing because they didn't mean to make fun of him for something that he has no control over. It's just, disease takes everybody at a certain point or has the ability to take everybody. And it's sad seeing that happen to one of the most charismatic, likable screen actors. And so kind of like Robin Williams before, it's like Bruce Willis is still with us, but I want people to remember that he was a star. And he meant something to us. He still means something to us. Like Die Hard is probably my favorite action movie of all time, and he's a huge part of that. So we definitely owe him a debt. So yeah, definitely Bruce Willis is one of the greats, and we still hope that he has more in him. We haven't heard the last of him. So okay, so we'll leave The Fifth Element behind. We'll leave Bruce Willis behind and just leave him to his own devices and let him live his life. What movie do we want to talk about next time, Jonny?
Okay, well, we have a guest, and she's been waiting patiently in the wings for quite some time now, and she's been wanting to come on, and she joins us once a season, so we have to have her on. And that is my wife, Ruth, or RJ Craddock, whatever you want to call her. She's going to join us, and she's finally going to talk about the movie she's been wanting to talk about for a long time now. So I finally relented and allowed it to happen. So,
is this the movie that every time she's come on, she said, Jonny, I wanted to talk about this one, but Jonny made me talk about this other one? Is this the movie finally?
This is the one. Yeah, this is the one.
Only took 3 tries. Okay.
So we're going to talk about So I Married an Axe-Murderer.
Okay. Yeah. Mike Myers was a fixture as well during the 90s. We're talking about Wayne's World. And Austin Powers was 97, right? Austin Powers 2 was 99. So yeah, definitely we want to talk about that. That'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
I remember liking that one a lot, especially Heat, get down. So that'll be fun to talk about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like it too. I mean, I don't like it as much as my wife likes it, but I do like it. So
okay, well, maybe you can just zip it, step out of her way, and just let her go. All right, sounds good.
I might do that.
Okay, so next time with RJ Craddock, we'll be talking about So I Married an Axe-Murderer. But until next time on NostalgiaCast, I'm Darin Lemberg.
And I'm Jonny Craddock.
And I am not a human being. I am a meat popsicle.
I'm Jonny Craddock, multipass.
Multipass. All right. All right. We'll catch you next time.